You're listening to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman on the Land of Israel Network.
Hello and welcome to Inside Israel Today here on the Land of Israel Network on thelandofisrael.com. Today is a solemn day here in Jerusalem because today is the 10th of Tevet on the Jewish calendar when the siege of Jerusalem began, culminating with the ultimate destruction of the Holy Temple, the Beit HaMikdash. There was a time when Jews fasted 3 days in a row on the 8th and the 9th and the 10th of Tevet, because on the 8th it was the anniversary of the Torah being translated into Greek at the request of King Ptolemy. Is P silent? Although it was a miracle that all 72 Torah scholars who were in different locations translated it the same way, it's still a sad day. The 9th of Tevet is the day that the great leaders of the Jewish people, Ezra and Nehemiah, passed away. So I'm quite thankful that there are not 3 fast days in a row. And I know that with the 10th of Tevet being considered a minor fast day, there are people who choose not to fast on this day. It's not Yom Kippur or Tisha B'Av, but I strongly believe in fasting on this day because with the siege of Jerusalem beginning, this was when the Jewish people really started to suffer in the previous commonwealth that the Jews had over here. And I think it would be ungrateful for us having a state of Israel right now if we didn't mark the suffering that went into the difficult process of keeping a Jewish state that we had back then. And so I'm doing this show without the usual orange juice provided by the executive producer of Inside Israel Today, and the mints that I'm addicted to that give me a nice clean mouth when I do a radio show. Everyone has their vices. Mine are mints, but it is important to mark the siege of Jerusalem because we've been through so many security challenges since then, and now is no different. While the chief of staff of the IDF was about to leave his post, Gadi Eisenkot has said repeatedly that the strategic situation for Israel has never been better. This is definitely a trying time right now. Over the last week and a half, we've had some devastating terror attacks that led to the murder of a unborn, just-born baby, and some IDF soldiers, and it's absolutely unacceptable what's going on right now. There's also tension on the border on the south, where we never know when the next rocket attack is going to happen. We also have tension on the border in the north with Lebanon, where the IDF is in the middle of Operation Northern Shield, where they've already detected the 3 tunnels that were stretching from Lebanon into Israel, buried underground, that could have been used to kidnap or massacre Jews on Israel's side of the border with Lebanon, which is a violation of UN Resolution 1701 that ended the last war, the Second Lebanon War between Israel and Lebanon. And right now, because Israel is only destroying tunnels that are on Israel's side of the border, there is no excuse for Hezbollah to be attacking Israel. But there are disputed areas on the border between Israel and Lebanon where Israel will also be destroying tunnels. And if the Hezbollah see them being on what they believe is Lebanese territory, then they could decide to fire upon Israeli soldiers, the engineering corps that's involved going in that important operation to make sure that the tunnel threat from Hezbollah in Lebanon would be eliminated. And so that can spiral out of control as well. Of course, there's always the threat from Iran. There's always the threat that there is from the rockets that the Hezbollah have. And you never know when things in Syria, where groups there will decide to attack Israel again. So there's plenty of tension for Israel on all sides of Israel's borders. Are we under siege? No, thank God. But I wouldn't want to be the Minister of Defense right now with all these challenges going on. Well, yesterday, the Knesset voted to give Israel a new Minister of Defense. He's new on the job as I tape this. He's only been on the job for about 15 hours or so. His name is Benjamin Netanyahu. Of course, our listeners have probably heard of him from other roles that he's had. He's been our Prime Minister, our Foreign Minister, our Minister of Health. He's our Minister of Immigrant Absorption at the moment when I'm taping this show, but at any given point he could give that portfolio out. And he's been our Finance Minister in the past, of course. And now he has become our Minister of Defense. He was our interim Minister of Defense since the 18th of November when the resignation letter of our previous Minister of Defense, Avigdor Lieberman, was kicked in. And so now this is Netanyahu's challenge. And I know that he welcomed it, that when he started this job, he immediately liked it a lot. He likes being in charge of Israeli security and not having somebody in his way to do what he wants to do on Israeli security. But there are pluses and minuses with that. The minus is that if you fail, or if anything goes wrong, you don't have a defense minister that's somebody else to blame. And whatever happens, positive or negative, the Israelis will be saying it's because of Netanyahu. And right now, after that week of violence, the Israelis do blame Netanyahu, according to the poll that was broadcast on Israel's Channel 2 TV on Sunday night. The poll found that 58% of Israelis are unsatisfied with Netanyahu's performance as defense minister. 33% are satisfied and 9% do not know. That was what they broadcast. But then I made a point of finding the poll itself, because I thought, wait a second, what if there's news here in this poll that they're not saying on TV? And sure enough, there was. The 33% of Israelis who are satisfied with Netanyahu's performance as Minister of Defense include 26% of the 33 who are somewhat satisfied. That doesn't leave very many who are very satisfied. Only 7% of Israelis are very satisfied with Netanyahu's performance as Minister of Defense. That's lower than the 9% who said, I don't know, which, by the way, is the correct answer. In these polls, you get very few Israelis saying, I don't know, and I don't know is almost always the correct answer when they take polls. And Israelis are not known for ever admitting that they don't know anything. But they got 9% of Israelis to admit the truth that they don't know. And only 7% say that they're very satisfied. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Benjamin Netanyahu. This is the Israeli with more security cabinet experience than any human being alive today. There's nobody better for the job that I can think of. I mean, who do you want? Avigdor Lieberman? Well, how good a job did he do? Moshe Bogi Ya'alon, the previous defense minister who burned so many bridges, can't get along with people. He can't really be the defense minister anymore. Netanyahu is the author of the book, The War on Terror. And if you can't trust him, then who are you going to trust? He's been telling us for so many years that he's the ultimate authority on security, and he's the only one who could really make Israelis feel safe. And now only 7% of Israelis believe that's true. What would have happened if they took the poll before that cute baby died? What would have happened if they took the poll before those beloved IDF soldiers died? Like a week and a half before, then would more than 50% of Israelis be happy with the performance of Netanyahu as defense minister? And that really just shows how Israelis have really short-term memories. You take a poll, and it really measures how Israelis feel at that given moment. You could take a poll an hour later, and you could get different results. A couple days later, definitely different results. A week from now, ladies and gentlemen, people aren't going to remember that baby. It's terrible to say. His name is Amiad Yisrael. His grandfather is Chaim Silberstein, the nice man of KeepJerusalem.com, who has done so many tours of parts of Jerusalem that people don't normally get to see. I strongly recommend you go to keepjerusalem.com and you help out the people over there who are doing good work. But, sorry, keepjerusalem.org. There we go. And he's a very special person, Chaim, and his kids, his daughter and son-in-law, from the interviews that they've given, showing such strength after what they went through, saying that they're going to have more children and get their revenge that way against the murderer of their baby, and who almost killed Shira herself. These are very, very special people, but Israelis have short memories. A couple weeks later, they're not going to remember. So I recommend you take this poll and all the polls in check and not take them too seriously. After the break, we're going to be talking more about revenge. Stay with us.
To make war upon rebellion is messy and slow, says T.E. Lawrence, like eating soup with a knife. Now I admit, I find life messy, but I never seem to feel that it's slow. I'm Rav Mike Foyer, and this is The Jewish Story.
Join Rav Mike Foyer for the best Jewish history podcast, The Jewish Story, on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com.
And we're back here on Inside Israel Today on the Land of Israel Network, on thelandofisrael.com. In the second part of our show, we are going to be talking about the wonderful concept of revenge, ladies and gentlemen. That's right, revenge. I've been covering politics for 20 years, and so I've become quite an authority on revenge, having seen many a politician decide to take revenge against another and put that above his ideology or above his own even political interests. There are plenty of politicians who right now have suffered politically because they've decided to make revenge such an important priority. One of the best being Aryeh Deri, the leader of the Shas party, who decided that he would rather prevent the government from lowering the threshold that could allow his Shas party to make it into the next Knesset, because he's worried that if his Shas party, because he's worried that if the threshold is lowered, then his rival, former Shas chairman Eli Yishai, will also make it into the Knesset. He'd rather have his own party not make it into the Knesset than allow his rival's party to make it into the Knesset. Now, what's more recent when it comes to revenge is that I spoke yesterday to Oren Chazan, member of Knesset for the Likud party, and Oren has been through all kinds of problems. He, from the very beginning, had some fights with both Netanyahu and the Knesset Speaker Yuli Edelstein, who did not want to give him any advancement because he sort of embarrassed the Likud by his problems that he had in the past, that when he worked in Bulgaria, he worked at a club where he allegedly helped people get prostitutes. It was a casino. That also doesn't seem so good. And this was his experience being elected to the seat reserved for a young candidate for the Knesset. And so even though Netanyahu had to appoint him deputy speaker of the Knesset, Yuli Edelstein has not let him function as the deputy speaker of the Knesset. He hasn't scheduled him as a functioning speaker of the Knesset to preside over the proceedings of the Knesset. And there have been various inappropriate statements made by Oren Chazan, including statements against disabled, do we use the word disabled, or handicapped, physically challenged people, and now I'm going to get censured. And because of that, he got punishments by the Knesset Ethics Committee, and currently he is not permitted to be in the Knesset plenum except when voting. And this is very frustrating for him because now he has to run up in order to vote, but then he has to leave immediately. And he also has been sick. He suffered various ailments all his life, and last week he was hospitalized in the Hadassah Ein Kerem hospital, and he reported to the Likud faction meeting yesterday that he was upset that no one came to visit him, which I'd understand no one coming to visit him, except it's a little bit worse considering that there was another Likud member of Knesset, Minister Ayub Kara, who was in the same hospital at the same time, and Likud Knesset members did visit him, and when they were in the hospital to visit Ayub Kara, they didn't bother visiting Oren Chazan too. And so right after he spoke about this in the Likud faction meeting, I met with Oren Chazan, and the reason why I met with him was because I needed to find out what rebellions are there going to be against Netanyahu. Netanyahu is right now staying in power. We don't know yet when the next election is going to be, but he has an agenda that he wants to still pass before this Knesset term is over. And one bill that is extremely important to Netanyahu is what's called the Gidon Sa'ar bill, which is a bill that would prevent anyone other than Netanyahu in the Likud from forming a government. Now, this bill is not intended for the beginning of the next Knesset session, when the president asks someone to form a government. And then it would be pretty obvious that if Netanyahu wins the election by a landslide, even if he's facing potential criminal charges, the people of Israel just voted for him, knowing full well what the charges are, and if they wanted Netanyahu, they get Netanyahu. But a year later, there could be the case advanced a lot more, in which case there could be pressure from parties in the coalition to make Netanyahu quit. But now, how would he be able to quit if the Knesset has passed a bill saying that only the head of the party can form a government? There would have to be a whole process of electing a new leader of Likud in order to have the Likud leader be the prime minister, whoever would replace Netanyahu. So it would become a lot more complicated, basically, if this Gidon Sa'ar law passes. Now, Gidon Sa'ar himself has purposely not done anything to undermine the prime minister. He knows that would hurt him politically. But Netanyahu was mad at Gidon Sa'ar for quitting when he was his number two before, and there's a certain element of revenge over here too. You did this to me, I'm not going to let you become leader of Likud. And Netanyahu, over the last couple months, we had an election for mayors, and the candidates that Gidon Sa'ar supported, Netanyahu wouldn't support. The mayors who came to Gidon Sa'ar's Hanukkah party, Netanyahu's people had told them, we're not going to help you in your cities because you went to Gidon Sa'ar's Hanukkah party. And so Oren Chazan comes very bitter, and he says, they didn't come visit me in the hospital. When they're looking for my hand to pass bills, they might not be able to find me. And that matters for Netanyahu more than anything on this Gidon Sa'ar bill, which is a change in a basic law, which are the bills that are the forerunner to a constitution that may never be written. And so, unlike other bills in the Knesset, they require a majority of 61 members of Knesset. Other bills you can pass by a vote of 2-1, but this one requires 61. Now, the coalition right now has a majority of 61-59. Temporarily, it even has a majority of 61-57, because there is a member of Knesset from the opposition who just got let out of the hospital and has to rest for the next 3 or 4 weeks. There's another member of Knesset who is pregnant in the opposition. Her due date is today, and when she takes her maternity leave, no one will replace her. So that there is a majority there for the coalition, but it's harder when you have a basic law being changed where you need to have the 61, and if you have a vote of 60-57, that's not good enough. And so they really need the vote of Oren Chazan in order to pass this bill that is more important to Netanyahu than any other bill. And so when I met with Oren, he gave me this list of conditions in order to get his vote. He said his conditions are expelling families of terrorists to the Gaza Strip, not going to happen. An IDF operation against Hamas in Judea and Samaria, not going to happen. Stopping payments from Israel to the Palestinian Authority. Oren, it's their money. Israel collects taxes and stuff, tariffs for the Palestinian Authority. It's their money. Israel gives it to them just because they don't have the apparatus to collect it themselves. So not going to happen. And Israel stopping funding from Qatar to Hamas. Okay, Israel facilitates the Qataris giving money to the people of Gaza so there won't be a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. It's in Israel's interest that there won't be a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And Netanyahu also wants to create an impression to the world that, look, I have better relations now with Qatar, just like I do with Oman, and Saudi Arabia, and with Bahrain, and other Arab and Muslim countries. And this is all part of promoting the peace plan of Donald Trump that no one knows when it'll be released. So again, not going to happen. And so this is going to be a very interesting fight. People don't realize how important this rejection that of Oren Chazan, of this member of Knesset who's been discredited so many times, now suddenly he has power. His hand matters. He has more power right now than the Prime Minister of Israel when it comes to the vote that the Prime Minister of Israel cares about the most. So we see revenge in action in Israeli politics, ladies and gentlemen. Now, there was another case, I guess, last night of revenge coming into play. And that happened in the game of the Memphis Grizzlies against the Golden State Warriors. Last season, Israelis were waking up in the middle of the night or early in the morning to watch games of the Golden State Warriors, not because they're the best team in the NBA, but because one of their bench players was the great Omri Casspi, the first Israeli in the NBA. And they wanted to see Omri play well for the best team in the NBA. And we were so proud of him until he got hurt right before the end of the regular season. And then there was a decision by the Golden State Warriors that even if Omri would get better in time for the playoffs, they needed his spot on the roster for another player who played a different position, and they cut Omri Casspi right before the playoffs, which was so sad because Omri, along with DeMarcus Cousins, who ironically now plays for the Golden State Warriors, these are the two players in the NBA that have played the most games in the regular season without playing in a single playoff game. Poor Omri's been on a lot of bad teams. Besides that season on the Warriors, his only year that he was on a good team was when he played for the Houston Rockets, which did not play him in the playoffs, even though he was not hurt at the time. And I guess his coach at the time didn't appreciate what he had to contribute, so he didn't play him. And poor Omri, it's time for him to get revenge. And so overnight, Israel time, the Golden State Warriors played the Memphis Grizzlies, and Omri Casspi led the Grizzlies off the bench with 20 points against his former team. This was very exciting. This was certainly the first time that Omri Casspi led the Memphis Grizzlies in points. And for it to come against the Golden State Warriors was that much sweeter. Now, I know that there'll be those who'll say Omri was only playing because the Warriors were winning by more than 20 points at the time. This was garbage time. And I say I won't let you dampen our joy at the revenge of Omri Casspi. And I know there'll be those who say that the really important headline in the game was that Steph Curry of the Golden State Warriors hit a milestone reaching 15,000 points on a three-pointer. There are not a lot of players in the NBA who have achieved 15,000 points. And that is very impressive. But we're here in Israel, and we care more about our own Omri Casspi, who famously scored when he was a member of the Sacramento Kings 2 years ago scored 36 points in a shootout of against Steph Curry when they were going back and forth, Omri Casspi and Steph Curry hitting three-pointer after three-pointer after three-pointer. And that game was what persuaded the Golden State Warriors that they had to go sign Omri Casspi. Now, following this morning's game where he got those 20 points, missing only 2 of 10 shot attempts, Steve Kerr, the Golden State Warriors coach, was interviewed about Omri Casspi, and he said, yeah, well, if Omri had shot last year like he did tonight, and then he said he took 4 of them, I think he took 8 all of last year, Kerr said, referring to Omri's three-point shot attempts. And then he said, no, Omri was great tonight at 20 points, was killing us on his back cuts, but for whatever reason, he didn't shoot threes last year. Kerr was correct. Last year in 53 games, Casspi took 22 attempts from beyond the arc. In less than half the games so far this season, Casspi has taken 21 shots from deep. What Steve Kerr may not know is that his Israeli friend hit from deep at a much higher rate during his time when he was with the Warriors than he has with Memphis, 455 percentage as opposed to 333. So perhaps the Golden State Warriors, seeing the way Omri Casspi played this morning, should think about their playoff roster when the playoffs come. You know, maybe they should be trading for Omri Casspi, and that would be something that would bring justice and perhaps also revenge. In Judaism, revenge is a negative thing, but there are times when revenge is justice and can be a positive thing. And we saw that with Omri Casspi's game today. And let's just say, though, that if the season ended today, the Grizzlies would make the playoffs as the number 8 and final seed, and perhaps that will result in them playing the Golden State Warriors in the first round of the NBA playoffs. With Omri Casspi playing there, hitting three-pointers like he did this morning, then the ultimate revenge would be accomplished. So, listeners, thank you for being part of our show today, and shalom, and soon to be Merry Christmas from here in Jerusalem. Bye-bye.
The question is, why are the Jews there in the first place? The Jewish people have been yearning to return to their ancient homeland for a long time.
The Yishai Fleischer Show, the voice of a new generation of pro-Israel activists.
And there's only 2 kinds of minorities in the Middle East, armed or unarmed.
Inspiring minds to think differently.
That jihadism doesn't just attack Jews. It attacks Christians, and it mostly attacks Muslims.
Inspiration, spirituality, and politics.
So first and foremost, this country is here to defend Jewish people and to live in its ancestral homeland.
Listen to the Yishai Fleischer Show every week on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com.